What the Tech is sponsored by Squarespace, the all-in-one platform that makes it fast and easy to create a professional website, blog, portfolio, and now an online store. Check out the new commerce solution so you can get started selling your stuff immediately. For a free trial and 10% off your first purchase on a new account, go to squarespace.com/whatthetech and use offer code WhatTheTech5. Audible.com, the internet's leading provider of audiobooks, with more than 100,000 downloadable titles across all types of literature. For a free audiobook of your choice, go to audiblepodcast.com/Andrew.
What's the tech?
Hey everybody, welcome to What the Tech. I'm Andrew Zarian, and I have returned back to Queens, New York. Unfortunately, and I wish every day that I was back in sunny California.
Oh, come on, though. It's nice here now.
Yeah, it's okay. You know what?
It's okay.
I'll tell you why. For people who don't know, last week I was actually broadcasting from the set of Battlestar Galactica, as the chat room put it. And I got home, and my neighbor had left the boombox on his roof because they were doing work on the house. So the entire night, I had to listen to Led Zeppelin on loop over and over and over again. I don't mind on a regular day, but not at 1:30 in the morning when I finally get into the house. The following day, I wake up to cops, about 20 cops in front of my house. My neighbor apparently got into a fight with his brother. Day 3, the cops are back, this time arresting everybody. And today, I woke up to scaffolding falling on my neighbor's house. They were doing work, so somebody came and sabotaged the scaffold, and now the entire scaffold has collapsed into their driveway and parts of mine. Welcome to Queens.
I'm sorry.
This is my life. Good. But I'm here. I'm actually glad to be back in the studio. All kidding aside, it was a nice trip. It was a nice trip. And I don't travel a lot, so I wanted to ask Paul, because, Paul, you travel a ton. You're always out somewhere.
Yep. I should be there now.
You should be in New York today. Yeah. Unfortunately, you're not.
My meeting was postponed.
Till, do you know?
No.
Okay. And being on the road for a week was a little bizarre for me because I don't leave my house. I never leave, and I have everything around me, and I kind of have everything set up the way that I like it, and I have created this little bubble around me that I don't even have to leave my house to go to work. And I have to tell you, I was really distraught for a couple days because even I was missing something always. A cable was missing. I didn't have a proper charger. I didn't have. My battery was dying on my phone, and I realized how flawed technology that we use every single day that we are okay with. How flawed the technology is. I mean, it just unbelievably. Battery technology is awful. My laptop, I have a MacBook Pro, which has decent battery life, was dying constantly. God forbid, I tried to make a phone call because my phone was dying every couple hours. It is the worst experience ever when you're kind of disconnected from what you're trying to do. I almost had an anxiety attack because I couldn't access anything.
Letting go is phase 3 of this process or whatever. I mean, yeah, I understand. I used to be really compulsive when I traveled, and depending on the year you're talking about, there were years where I would travel with a little disc case full of CDs and then DVDs that included such things as the Windows install disc, the Office install disk, the Photoshop install disk, a couple of disks worth of data, just as backups, just in case I needed to get back up and running. And, the way things have evolved over the years is, that stuff isn't as difficult. And although you're having problems there before the show to getting a Surface RT device going again, resetting a Windows 8-based PC normally is pretty straightforward. It can happen really quickly, and getting back up and running and downloading what you need online and all that is usually pretty easy. So I don't worry about that stuff anymore, or at least as much as I used to.
Paul, and for people who don't know, Paul wrote a blog post recently about what you it's what I use on the road, and you have like this little itinerary of like steps you follow, and I wish I had read this before I left. I really do, because
well, everyone's needs are different. I mean,
well, you take a lot of stuff. Like you bring 2 Kindles.
Yeah, and I actually I mentioned in that article. I mean, that's just my own thing. Honestly, though, the bag that I carry on is not very large or heavy, and one of them is like what you would think of as an iPad. It's a Kindle Fire HD, the big one. It's for watching movies. I also subscribe to various magazines on that device, but for the most part, when I'm home, I never touch it. I don't really use it. And so in the couple of days before I go away, I'll rent a couple of movies and throw them on there. And, maybe I watch one on the plane. Maybe I don't. I don't know. The other Kindle, the small one, is a Paperwhite, and that's the one I read on every single day. And so the books that I read and the newspapers I read every day are on there, and the battery life lasts for weeks sometimes. So it's just a good thing to have with you, because you never know, And I don't know. I used to be really compulsive about stuff. I used to bring multiple portable devices. I used to bring multiple like MP3 type devices.
Backups,
yeah. And
I kind of got like that. Like I downloaded like literally 90 podcasts. Because it was like I was taking a boat. And
then you go and you come back
Antarctica.
and you listen to one of them.
That's exactly what I did. I listened to one, and that was it. My flight back was a lot better than going there. But this is what I realized going. Mm-hmm. You cannot go. You cannot if you're going to be doing any kind of work, an iPad is not enough.
Well,
it is not enough. And I know people that travel exclusively with an iPad. Mm-hmm. I want to know what I'm missing. Because I could not do it. Yeah. There was no possible way.
Okay. So obviously everyone's needs are different. I think we could just kind of admit to that and move on. I mean, some people need to just answer emails and browse the web and stuff, and I'm sure an iPad is fine for that kind of thing. Obviously, for what I do, I'm a writer, and I specifically write about Windows, and so, I need a laptop, and that's just the reality. I'm never going to get work done. I could theoretically get away with something like a Surface RT or a Surface Pro. Maybe.
I think a Surface Pro more than anything else, because that's an actual, that's a real computer. It's not like this limited
if the Surface
appliance.
Pro came in the form factor of the Surface RT and got that kind of battery life, I probably would put up with some of the size deficiencies just to have that level of portability.
But isn't that the hope with Haswell? Isn't this what we're hoping with the Haswell chipset?
Yeah,
that
of course. It's always going to be better next time. That's the thing. We'll see. The truth, the other thing for me, and this is just me personally, I have a 15-inch Ultrabook. I think it weighs, I want to say 3.5 pounds, 3.6 pounds, something like that. But it has a really big screen, high res, nice, decent keyboard, I should say. It's not a nice keyboard. It's not like a ThinkPad keyboard, but reasonable keyboard. Much more spacious than a Surface as far as just the keyboard, and the screen, of course, is ginormous compared to it. And I really like having that. I really, and the way that I fly, at least domestically, I always get one of those extra legroom seats on a JetBlue flight, and I can always work on those planes.
And that's what I got. I got an upgrade. I took JetBlue. Yep. The other thing that baffles me is that how is it in 2013 we still do not have Wi-Fi access on planes?
Yeah, that's a JetBlue thing. So
JetBlue's adding that. They're adding it in like a couple months, but it just...
Yeah, I had heard from one of the pilots who told me that. I'm a little mixed on that one, though, to be honest. I mean, part of me, I would get it. So that's the thing. So the first JetBlue flight that I show up for and they have it, I am going to get it. But I'm a person who has taken a lot of flights and a lot of train trips. And, of course, now you can get... they have Wi-Fi in trains now. But I kind of like that forced offline couple of hours thing, especially if it's 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 hours. It's not horrible.
I don't know, Paul. For me, I mean, I was like shaking.
No, I think it's healthy to get away from it. My last trip into Denver, I was there about an hour and a half before the guy I travel with arrived, and so I set up in the food court and got online and answered my emails, posted comments to the blog, wrote a couple of or actually I'd written some stuff on the plane, finished those up because some of the things, that I write about maybe need a couple of hyperlinks or whatever it is that required me to be online just to complete them. And then, publish those things. It was, that's not a horrible day. I mean, it's a way to get stuff done, but
The other thing that it was a total eye opener to me was the lack of coverage for cell phone service in certain areas. You would imagine that I'm in.
LA.
I mean, you would imagine that I was in. I mean, a major, not a major city, but a affluent town in Southern California. I was in Los Angeles. I was in major, cities like Studio City and Sherman Oaks. There was no Verizon service anywhere.
Yeah, so
Anywhere.
when people make a blanket statement like Verizon is the best wireless carrier in the United States or AT&T has the best service and whatever it is, your mileage is going to vary. That's never true. It depends on where you live and where you go. And so in my case, AT&T makes the most sense. I happen to live in a dead zone, but I don't. I mean, I do get cell access, but I don't use my mobile phone at home all that much. It's mostly when I'm out doing things. And so around the area, AT&T is fine. The places I travel to, AT&T is fine. And I happen to travel internationally every year. So AT&T has what I consider to be superior, like international roaming type plans for data, voice, and for text.
Paul, it was like I was on a bad cruise. There was no
Yeah,
service
but
anywhere.
all right, but I don't know what your year is going to look like exactly, but if you kind of look at this whole year, and maybe that's the one trip that you go on where you're on the other side of the country and you don't have a lot of good access. If that was the only time that happens to you this entire year, so what? I mean, so
Yeah.
Verizon's still a good choice for you. I mean, that's just
I
blip.
just found I was just amazed at just like the little things like bandwidth being an issue for people. There was a bandwidth problem where I was, and after 6:00 every night, the bandwidth has totally gone to crap because
Yeah.
there's a node issue, and Time Warner has no idea how to fix it. I mean, I felt so bad because there's so many people that have this problem, and I haven't experienced it. I mean, I guess I'm lucky. I know people in New York that have this problem, but I mean, it's just amazing how we think, we're so connected at this point, but there's still dead spots all across this country. And that's a major problem. It's a major problem.
Yep.
So that was my rant for 10 minutes. I'm sorry I took up the show with my traveling rants, but man, I just want everything to work for me. That's all. That's all I ask
No, but
for.
I think it's important to get out.
No,
You
it
know,
is.
to understand what this is like. I mean, one of the things that I did when I don't remember when was this. Actually, it was about a year ago. When I moved to the Lumia 900 at the time, I killed my grandfathered unlimited account on AT&T and got a 4 gigabyte tethered account with tethering. I think that's right. And the woman at the AT&T store didn't want to cancel that account. She said it was like killing a unicorn, because there aren't too many of them left. But for what I do, you go to a place where there's not a lot of good Wi-Fi, I need to be able to get online regardless. And so, for example, that day in the airport I was talking about, I actually eventually switched over to my phone's connection because the airport Wi-Fi was terrible.
Yeah.
And it's just nice to have it. And I kind of monitor the usage. I mean, this particular month, with my billing month is about to come to a close along with the regular month. And I came close enough to my limit that AT&T started sending me those text messages saying, hey, by the way, you're at like 80% or whatever. But, most months, even with the travel I do, I don't get all that close to it. So, it's worked out for me pretty well.
It's amazing. I mean, it's. And by the way, if anybody wants to get Paul's list and how he travels, this was actually. I wish I had read it because it would have reminded me to take a bunch of stuff. Like I only brought a USB charger for my phone and not one that actually connects to the wall. So it was literally taking me like 30 hours to charge my phone fully, 100% because it was draining the battery constantly.
Yeah.
So
Right.
no, that's weird. I just got logged out of the Google chat. We'll see what happens. So I wish I read it. So if anybody wants to go see it, we're going to put it in their notes. And of course, go to winsupersite.com/mobile/what-i-use-road. I think it's much easier if I just post it in the chat room. I think that's a much easier thing. Paul, I want to go into a couple things because
Okay.
I can't say his name now. Thorsten Heins, BlackBerry CEO, said
Thorsten
something.
Howell III, the CEO of RIM.
Yeah.
BlackBerry, whatever.
He said something very interesting, and I kind of wanted to get your point on this.
Yep.
Very shocking statement. Well, not shocking because it's RIM, but before we do that, I want to talk about our sponsor, and that's Squarespace. Talking about Squarespace for a while here on the show, and I recently had to use Squarespace again. I don't use it personally for my site. A lot of people that work for me use it. Chauncey Hayden's site is going to be built on that, which I'm using it as a portfolio for all the photography he's done over the last 30 years. He's a photographer. He's an amazing photographer. And This Week in Radio Tech, which is on the GFK network, Kirk Harnack's site is on Squarespace. And I had to do a little change. He had embedded something that was kind of off, and he gave me the password. I logged in, and boy, was it super, super easy. And the great part about it is that they get statistics on there, so you can see the tracking, you can see what pages. So everything is in there. You don't have to install Google Analytics, or you don't have to use Stack Counter. Everything is right there. But the other part was it was so easy to update a site, and it does caching. It does all that. It was a very, very easy experience for anybody that really doesn't want to fiddle around. I recommend Squarespace. I know Paul's doing a Squarespace site for his. It's a simple site, Paul.
Yeah,
it's a very simple site. Very simple man, simple site, but it works great. And I think I really started recommending him after I had some experience with it. Here's a cool part too. If you're someone that likes to fiddle around, they offer developer tools. So if you want to play with the CSS or PHPs or whatever they call them these days, I don't even know. I have someone that does everything for me at this point. I don't like to mess around with it. You go to Squarespace. Squarespace.com/whatthetech is the link. And if you use offer code whatthetech3, you get 10% off a new purchase. Also, if you're looking to do an e-commerce site, this is a great thing. They have an e-commerce solution for you. You could do fast payment there. You could sell digital goods, including physical goods also. And it starts at $24 a month when you sign up, which is great. Squarespace.com/whatthetech and use whatthetech5. I'm sorry, whatthetech5 is the promo code, not whatthetech3. Whatthetech5 and get 10% off on a new account. I want to thank Squarespace for supporting What the Tech. I forgot what month we're in, Paul. I honestly thought we were in March. I don't know why.
It's going to be May tomorrow, so.
I know, it's crazy. It's insane. My birthday's in 13 days.
Wow.
Yeah. I'm very excited. I get very, very excited around my birthday. I want to talk about this, Paul. So Thorsten Heins, not the ketchup guy.
I know, jeez, what a name, huh?
Thorsten
you sure that's his
Heins.
name?
Yeah,
Is that right?
Thorsten Heins. Yeah, that's his name. Thorsten Heins. Insane name. I don't think that's a CEO name. You know what a CEO name is? It's like Bob Smith, CEO.
No, it's the name of a butler.
Thorsten Heins.
Thorsten. It's like Thorsten. It's like a kind of a German.
I'm gonna get the email.
Kind of a German
hey Andrew,
name.
what kind of tech guy are you? You don't even know his name. Thorsten Heins. I'm saying it wrong. Thorsten.
Heins.
Not the ketchup guy. So he turned around and he said tablets are going to be useless in about 5 years. Very interesting
well,
statement
he should
by
know.
him. Well, he should know, yeah, because this company might be irrelevant in a year.
Yeah.
But this is the direct quote from Bloomberg. He says, in 5 years, I don't think there's going to be a reason to have a tablet anymore.
What's going to change that would make a tablet?
I don't know. And this is the bizarre thing. And I wanted to get your analysis on this because...
Okay. So
why? I mean, they failed with the playbook. I mean, it was a major flop.
Yeah. Okay.
But the entire market, is he talking about the iPad? Because I can't imagine the iPad being being dead in 5 years.
No, I mean, I think there's kind of a weird race to the bottom occurring right now in the tablet market, where obviously the big growth sector is these 7-8-inch tablets, the mini tablets. We're starting to see really inexpensive versions of those tablets. This is going to get worse. That kind of device cannot replace a computer. It's purely a companion / consumption type device. And if anything, I mean, the big growth market in smartphones is probably giant smartphones that are basically small tablets. I mean, which bridge that kind of weird gap between traditional smartphones with 4.5-inch screens and have, 5, 6, whatever inch screens as well. So I don't know what to say to that. I mean, I actually think there's going to be, I think it gets messier than it is even today, where you have just a range of screen sizes, and it's going to be hard to understand what the subtle difference is between a 6-inch tablet that's really a phone and a 7-inch tablet that doesn't have phone, and that these things are all going to be in the market together, right?
If we were to if I were to play his side, maybe he's right. Maybe the state of the tablet as we know it currently will not be in existence. It'll be irrelevant in 5 years because it'll do a whole lot more than we do right now with it. Right now, they're appliances. It's a consumption device. I use it as a gaming platform on the iPad. I'm not really using it as far as a computer goes.
You know, you were just talking about the lack of internet access, both in places that you visited and on the plane that got you there. And there's an infrastructure thing that needs to occur before that goes away. But a similar infrastructure improvement that could occur would be pervasive access to the services that you subscribe to, so that if you went on that trip and you were, you said, I couldn't go on a trip and not bring a computer. What if you went on the trip and the screen behind the chair that you were sitting on the plane was a really big screen, that took up most of the size of that thing, and the tray came down and could have a keyboard on it, and you could work on that, or you could watch, the HBO movies that you subscribe to on that, or the, whatever. I mean, what if you didn't have to carry anything? What if this stuff was just around, that these services were just available virtually anywhere? I mean, maybe that's what he's saying, that, the future of this stuff, what's the future beyond mobile or portable? It's like, how do you go beyond that? I mean, I guess you go beyond it so that, there are going to be watches and glasses and things like that, but maybe it's these interactive screens that are just kind of everywhere.
I guess. I mean, for me, I honestly, I was considering not bringing the laptop at all with me. The only reason why I brought it is because I had to do a show, and I need a lot of stuff that's on here. But if I were to just bring a tablet, maybe it's because I'm not used to it, but I cannot see functioning all day long with just using an iPad. It would be nearly impossible for me. Now, is that going to be the case in a couple of years if we're able to do, split screens and have the applications running in the background, and you could kind of have it up like a desktop mode? Who knows? I mean, I don't know. But currently, it's not a replacement now. But in 5 years, the only thing I could see happening is growth for these devices. Devices like the iPad.
For the short term, there is nothing but growth. Absolutely.
I mean, short term, but what happens in 10 years?
Well, I mean, I think the next milestone here is going to be, where this plateaus, whether hybrid computing devices make a lot of sense. You pointed out that I bring 2 Kindles with me when I travel and a laptop, right? And so, if I could just bring that laptop and the Swing spun around and it turned it into kind of a tablet, and that thing got like 15 hours of battery life, I mean, why wouldn't I just bring that, And I guess arguably I would probably just bring that.
You know where my problem with these devices is, and I was, if you go back a couple of months ago when Windows 8 was coming out, I'm like, this is the device. I want something that's I could click in and click off and walk around with it. But a 13-inch,
it sounds good theoretically.
Theoretically, it sounds great, but do you want to walk around with a 13-inch tablet?
Sure.
That's the problem.
I don't know. Yeah.
I mean, let's say we killed the bezel on this thing, because I'm looking at my MacBook right now. Let's say we killed the bezel.
Right.
It's a little better, but I mean, it's still a large screen to be walking around with and taking off and putting back on.
Yes.
I mean, that's the only issue that I have with the future of tablets is, okay, so how are you going to bridge the gap between being an appliance and being your like a real computer? There's something that you sit and you get work done on, and you don't think twice, and you don't think about the limitations of it. I guess something like the Surface is what makes sense, but like the Surface Pro, but
I will give him a little bit of credit. I mean, one of the things that we've talked about on this show in the past is this notion that things happen more quickly as you move forward, so that Microsoft dominated the PC industry for some, 25, 30 years, whatever. And then these generations get smaller and smaller. And I think you and I had talked about this notion that, multi-touch as a sort of replacement, if you will, for mouse and keyboard is not something that lasts for a super long time, that we kind of move on to the next thing more quickly. And the next thing might be voice control, and I don't know what you call it, but when you wave your hands around in the air, like a Kinect type air gesture or whatever that's called.
Minority Report.
Yeah.
I just want to wave. The problem that I would have is that I'm from New York and my wife is Italian, so we do like a lot of like hand talking.
Yeah, you'd be blue screening the thing all the time.
This happens a lot in my house.
Sure.
I just deleted my entire C drive. It's all gone.
But the other thing for Thorsten, I guess, is that his name? Is his company hasn't made a tablet that was successful, so I'm not surprised to hear that he's down on it. I mean, he's pushing. It's one of those when you're a hammer, everything's a nail thing. I mean, he's pushing a vision where tablets don't matter because that's what his company does. Google is not pushing a client-side Office suite that you buy at Best Buy because Google's a web company, and that's how they deliver stuff. That's the way companies work. So BlackBerry makes phones, basically. I mean, they also make, I guess, a service and that kind of thing, but they don't have a tablet. So
yeah. Well, they do. I mean, the Playbook.
Like I said, they don't have a tablet.
Here's my thing. If we're going to look at the future of the PC, which right now, I was talking to Paul off the air, and I was saying, it's such an exciting year for technology. Mm-hmm. A lot of these devices, the gap is getting bridged, and you're pretty much going to be able to access everything you want across all platforms. We're going to see the PlayStation 4 come out. We're going to see the next generation Xbox. We're going to see next generation iOS, Windows 8.1. Don't know about Android because they said Android 5.0 is not coming out, but we're seeing these gaps, the separation between all these devices kind of becoming one. And Microsoft really took a big leap and did that, but it's fascinating that this is the direction that we've taken over the last year, where everybody's saying, you know what, we have to be able to access everything everywhere. It's not really, our devices are not competing with each other. We need to provide the services. So it's actually going to be a pretty fun year if you're covering this stuff.
Yeah, I like it when stuff is going on. Yeah. It's we're not in the downtime between anything. We're in the middle of it, and Microsoft is obviously in the midst of a big transition, and so it's cool for people like me that follow Microsoft. But Apple has always been on their kind of 1 year plan, and so they're always going to be interesting. Every year Apple always does something, and Google, if anything, is already, it always has been very fast moving, and we'll see if that ever slows down. But Google I/O is happening soon, isn't it? In May?
In late May.
So that's always very interesting, and there'll be information there about Android, whatever they do there. I'm sure about Google Glasses, which I don't personally care about, but everyone seems to think is a big deal. And some other crazy Google stuff, because that's what they always do. We're going
to see a $500 media device that is not running an Android or Chromium or anything. It's just running something new.
Yep.
Which I'm excited to see that. Very excited to see that. So we were talking about iOS, and we were talking about how they're kind of bridging the gap too. And a lot of information is coming about iOS 7, and Paul and I have been talking about this for a while and saying how their look is outdated at this point. The operating system feels older looking. So what can they do to kind of liven it up? And I said, the BlackBerry operating system felt new and fresh to me. Android is getting there to me. I mean, it's kind of growing on me. And by the way, Google now really grew on me.
Yeah.
And I've crapped on Google for a long time with this phone, but holy cow, was it useful while I was away. The moments that my phone did work, it was really useful. So I want to say that. But Apple's in an interesting situation because they are now focusing on software. And they're saying they're getting a very flat look. And it kind of reminds me of what Microsoft is doing with Windows Phone. Where it's a kind of flat look.
It sounds like it does, right?
It kind of does sound like it does.
We'll have to see what that means. Because flat doesn't mean it has to look like Windows or Windows Phone, I guess. I mean, flat could be anything. I think it's clear to everyone except for Steve Jobs and Scott Forstall that the move to these kind of skeuomorphic designs where a note-taking app resembles a yellow pad of legal paper, and a calendar app has a little torn-off thing in the corner that looks like there used to be another piece of calendar paper there is not just old-fashioned, but it's lazy, and it's really bad design. And it's not helpful in any way because the kind of people that use these products have never even used these things. No one listening to a podcast used a reel-to-reel tape.
Yeah.
This is not... It's not helpful, So they'll change it. And by the way, there's all kinds of ways you could change iOS. And I'm very eager to see what they do.
I am too. I really hope they take this version of iOS and they kind of bring it. I don't want to say to the times because the phone it's a good operating system, but I mean the overall UI needs to be freshened up a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
You know, listen, I'm trying to be nice. I'm trying to be nice. But here's the other thing that I noticed. You know, I was looking at, because the rumors are also that this is also going to take effect in OS 10 with the next generation, and they're kind of going to have a very similar look and feel, and they're going to go with the flatter look for the operating system, and I welcome that. And I was looking, I'm like, what can they change? And I was looking at that bottom bar, you know, the dock menu.
Yep.
And it's, you know, shiny metallic, and then there's a reflection of the apps underneath it. And I'm like, that is a perfect example of a useless feature that they are putting on, and they're doing it because they could.
No, you know why they did? Well, they did it because that dates back some number of years. I mean, when Mac OS 10 was just coming out, and it's like 12 years ago now, right? 12 years ago. You know, it was the first general purpose desktop operating system to do hardware accelerated graphics, to take the load off of the CPU and give you these effects, you know, transparency and translucency, that kind of stuff. And so a lot of the, you know, the first 4 to 6 years of Mac OS 10, a lot of the kind of demos they would do would be like, you know, watch us. We're going to slow it down so you can see it, because when we minimize an icon, you know, it kind of swishes down into the corner, and everyone oohed and awed and clapped at stuff like that. And a lot of it was just kind of feel good stuff to show the faithful that they were still ahead technologically, even though it didn't necessarily make sense all the time. I mean, some of that stuff makes sense. And when you're talking about those reflections in the dock, and the weirdness of that, you know, that the dock appears to be sitting on a piece of glass that for some reason is going off into the distance, even though the icons on top of them are flat and two-dimensional, and
sure,
you know, weird. It's just it's a vestigial piece of the past. You know, there are tremendous gains that they could make on both of their systems. You know,
OS absolutely,
and iOS,
absolutely, and so, you know, we'll see. The kind of they are doing something totally different now, because Microsoft has taken the path that they've combined this tablet OS and the Windows, you know, their desktop OS into one, where I don't know if Apple doesn't have the luxury of selling these like 2-in-1 devices. Nor I don't even think they want to. So they could really, you know, in a weird way, they could kind of make the OS 10 version of what a lot of people wanted from Windows. You know, where it's kind of Metro-wise, but it's not really Metro.
Sure. Well, by the way, one of the things that Microsoft got right in Windows 8 that a lot of people don't talk about is that they flattened the desktop part of the UI.
Oh, and I love that.
Yeah, I do too. And some people don't. You know, some people do like the transparency stuff. I mean, I guess you could just make the argument they should have offered both ways of doing things. But I think that the chasing after Apple and the translucency effects and all that was just a waste of time. You know, it didn't really offer any benefits at all. It's a waste of cycles. It's a waste of battery life. It's just something that was a mistake, you know.
Is it weird that I still in Windows I turn everything off and I have like the XP start bar, the start menu?
a little bit, yeah.
I just remove everything. I don't want any visuals on my thing. So I thought this was cool, and I don't know what they could do with it. I mean, like the future of OS 10, like we clearly see the outline and the future of Windows 8. Even though it's going to be a little rocky until they get everything right, it's still it has been put in stone, and we kind of know the path that they're going to be taking, and we kind of could expect, you know, we know, okay, in 5 years, this is probably what it's going to be like. I have no idea what OS 10, because OS 10 has been the same for the last 10 years. I mean, visual upgrades here and there, but
so
what are they going to do? Because now they have 2 separate operating systems.
Yeah, and actually, a weakness of Apple that I don't think gets discussed enough is that this is a company that is very compartmentalized, in the sense that people work on projects. They're separated from other people. They're often done in secret. You know, that they don't really have a lot of cross-project interoperability. One of the things that came out in the past week is this video from guys from Microsoft talking about how Microsoft at some point decided they needed to stop being embarrassed by their size and just kind of embrace it. That one of the cool things about a company that is as diverse as Microsoft is that they have all this stuff, and these things should all work together. And you see it in little ways in things like Windows Phone when it has an Office hub and an Xbox hub and all that stuff, and you integrate all of the services that Microsoft has into a single place.
I mean, we're seeing an Outlook with integration with Skype now.
Right. So the integration is good. And so, one of the problems with the Apple approach, and by the way, there's no reason they can't change it. It's just part of their current culture, is that iOS and macOS 10 are separate, that they're done separately. And they talk about how, we learned this from iOS and we added this interface from iOS to OS 10 and all that kind of stuff. But, the day that you see a hybrid machine from Apple is the end of an era, because it's going to mean one of two things. They either did change very dramatically, because maybe there are some people who would like a MacBook Pro where you could pop off the screen and it became an iPad.
And it's a very reactionary change also for them.
Right. But, well, yes, but sometimes you do have to react. I mean, if you're not doing things the right way, it's healthy to react. But it might also mean that's the end of OS 10. I mean, the other fear is that that's the beginning of the end, because Apple's other products, the iOS products, do amazingly well compared to Mac OS 10.
Yeah.
And that kind of thing would be a step in some direction that I think some people would find troubling.
I mean, I in a weird way, I've kind of hung on to my MacBook because I kind of like the desktop environment, and I'm not crazy about Windows 8 right now. So this became my primary computer for a while. I don't know. It's I'm uncomfortable with that thought that they could just make everything iOS like and be like, okay, here's the button, one application opens up, there you go.
Yeah. I don't think anyone actually wants that on the desktop.
The chat room's writing Windows 7 forever.
Sure.
Year 2042, we're still running Windows 7.
Oh, we've been talking about this for a little while. Windows 7 is the next XP, and I don't think people understood how serious that was. But the people who don't like Windows 8 are pretty serious about not liking Windows 8, and so.
I mean, maybe with 8.1 and possibly, I don't know if they're going to call it 8.2, they're going to kind of bring everybody over and be like, hey, listen, we added this back, we put that back in, so you could have yours.
I hope so.
You can boot into desktop
I
mode.
hope. Right. I mean, so far, all the stuff we've seen in those leaked builds have been improvements to Metro, which it needs, badly. But I'd also like to see improvements to the desktop and improvements to the ways that those two things interact.
Are you talking about improvements UI-wise or like functionality of desktop?
Well, I think there can always be. So actually, I mean, the desktop as it stands today, I would say, is actually in pretty good shape. I mean, there's always things you can improve.
Have you tried emailing them that little mock-up you had on your website about a year ago?
They saw it.
Because I like that a lot.
Yeah, the side-by-side stuff. I mean, they have good reasons for keeping those things separate, obviously, but they could integrate them better.
Sure. No, I agree with you 100%, and that's kind of the hope with this. I'm out of all the bad from Windows 8, I'm really happy that they're being very aggressive with the upgrading, that they're going on this yearly cycle of updates.
I wish it was more aggressive.
You want 6 months.
The Office team is upgrading that product quarterly. I mean, why can't it be quarterly? Why can't it be just a, and that's kind of the problem. I mean, I would say the past 30 days have been pretty good because we've finally gotten some app updates. But the first 5 months were silence, Yeah. You can look at products like Surface RT and Surface Pro.
But it was silence because were they waiting for the overall shock and awe to go away and to kind of evaluate it based on that? Or
I'll never know unless they tell us. I have no idea what they were waiting for.
Yeah.
All I know is that there are apps in Windows 8 that are borderline unusable, and they've just sat there unchanged for months at a time, and there's no excuse for that. I mean, part of the point behind the architecture of this product is that those things can be updated at any time. Why isn't the mail update getting a small update, the mail app, getting a small update every week or two? I mean, it certainly could use it. So it was nice to get that update. They did finally update the mail app last month. But, we waited 5 months for that. It's crazy.
It's way too long. Way too long.
Way too long. They could do this monthly.
Just a hypothetical, is it because they're not used to this appified mentality where, hey, listen, if there's a bug, here you go, just push it through every week and fix it? you look on iOS, you look on Android, where there are updates every single week for some of these apps.
I can only speculate why. I mean, all I can say is that Microsoft is moving to a model where its products are delivered to customers and then updated as if they were online services, even when they're not. And Office has done a really good job of this. Visual Studio has done a really good job of this. The Surface guys have done a really good job of it. It's amazing, a hardware product. They've gotten a firmware update on both those products every single month. Amazing. Windows, I have a feeling they're clapping themselves in the back because, look, we just moved from a 3-year model to a 1-year model. We're 3 times as fast as we used to be. That's cute. But Windows needs a lot of work. It needs to be updated more than that. At least for now.
At least for now.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully one day, Paul. We could only wish. Paul, It is. We haven't done this for a while. We haven't done an Audible pick of the week.
Yeah.
We're going to do our Audible pick of the week, followed by a new segment we added to the show, and that is called What Went Wrong? Paul and I like to complain a lot about technology and products that we're not so happy with. And I don't know about you, Paul, but I like it when we go back and we think about products and we're like, wow, this could have been great, but it wasn't.
Yeah. Yep.
I take that approach with technology. I'm not a tech expert. I'm an enthusiast. Paul is the know-it-all on the show. He knows everything. I just show up and, I try to
I'm
look
also
pretty.
a tech enthusiast. No, I can't claim. I don't know everything.
I look at Paul for guidance in technology.
You're in for a world of hurt, my friend.
He randomly gets a message, and sometimes I just throw him off. I'm like, hey, how do you do a trace route on a Mac?
Yeah, right.
Hey, what's the command for ping? So we're going to go into our What Went Wrong segment, and I encourage all of you guys to participate in this. Let us know what you think in the chat when we get to our topic. But before we do, I want to talk about Audible.com. Paul, I loaded up on a bunch of Audible books on this trip. I listened to none of them, and I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why.
Please do.
I lost my headphones. First, actually, I lost my iPhone, my iPad at the airport. This I name bothers me. So my iPod Touch. I said iPad. I said iPhone. I left everything out. I lost my iPod Touch at the airport, and I got an email like an hour later as I'm about to board saying, "Hey, I found your iPod Touch. It's at
that's incredible.
The store that I left it at.
Incredible.
I gave it to the guy behind the counter. Here's my info if you don't get it." So I went there and he's like, "Oh, here it is." Turns out,
wow.
I'm like, "Who was it?" And he told me it was some like woman that worked at like the Dunkin' Donuts. I went and I got her like a coffee from like Starbucks just to be a little bit of a jerk, but. I got her coffee. I'm like, hey, thanks so much. And I had to run on the plane. As I get on the plane, I realize I don't have my headphones.
Wow.
There's no headphones. So I had to go when I got to LA. I bought headphones. So I loaded up on like 5 or 6 audiobooks that I had credit for from like previous months.
You really should have read my article before you left.
I know. But I was just thinking, I'm like, if I did have headphones.
Let me show you something.
Yeah.
Let me show you something. This is the bag that
the survival kit, the Paul Thurrott survival kit.
In this bag, just sitting in here, are an extra pair of headphones. Because they're always there, because you never know. They're there for that reason. You just keep them in the bag. They don't take up any space. They don't make up any weight. They're just sitting there.
When I got to LA, here are the headphones that I got. So I get there and I'm like, he's like, what are you looking for? And of course, the guy at the airport showed me like $400 headphones. I'm like, just give me something. He's like, we have something. I'm like, what's the cheapest thing you have? It's like $35. I'm like, just give me that. Turns out they're Bob Marley headphones. So I have the Bob Marley.
Listen, but that's not a bad choice because those are the kind of cords that don't tangle, right? They don't. No,
it's a very good headphone. I was actually very surprised, but I was very disappointed that I got to listen to none of these audiobooks that I loaded up on, and it was quite disappointing because that's all I wanted to do on the plane was just listen to a couple of these books that I downloaded.
You're freaking me out. That is just sad. I have listened to more audiobooks in the last couple of weeks than I have in a long time.
So what is your pick? What are you listening to now?
There's 2 things I've been doing, like audiobook wise. I've gone back and I've listened to the Thomas Harris books, the Hannibal Lecter books, Red Dragon, Silence of the Lambs. I'm actually on Hannibal right now. I will always have kind of a soft spot in my heart for those books for whatever reason, especially Red Dragon, which is just kind of a superior story.
Are you watching this TV series for Hannibal?
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah.
Actually, by the way, that was what triggered it. The Hannibal TV series is a heavy user of dialogue lifted straight from the book. In fact, some of it now is being lifted from Silence of the Lambs as well. I find that a little disturbing. The show is okay. It's not. I wouldn't say it's great. It's not bad. I like that they've reimagined a lot of the characters as women, which is interesting because the first book is kind of a sausage fest. But it's okay. It's okay. The books range from unbelievable to very good. I mean, I'd say most of those books are very good. But the pick this week is actually another series. I've been rereading those Dan Brown books because there's a new one coming out in May. And I'm actually listening to the Da Vinci Code right now, which obviously is the classic, I guess, or the big one. And I recall being really impressed by the mythology stuff that's in this book. And I have to tell you, going back to it now several years later, the story itself is good. It's fine. I mean, it's good. But it is that sort of the research into all of that mythology stuff, which I think is what sets this book apart from, from other books like it, or whatever.
It was to the point that people thought it was real.
Yes, I mean, right. And on that note, job well done. I mean,
yeah.
Some of the stuff in the story is a little hokey, but the audiobook version of it, I because I was on that trip, I actually listened a lot on the plane. I listened a lot while I was there driving around. I had an extra day to kill. I drove up to Wyoming. I had the thing going the whole time in the car. And when I got back, I've actually been walking every day, not just to listen to audiobooks, but I've actually been listening to audiobooks walking around the neighborhood since I've been back. I kind of want to wrap the whole thing up and then move on to the new one, which is coming, I think, in a week or two, sometime in May. Anyway, it's a decent one, and it's not super expensive. I think it holds up pretty well. The audiobook version is pretty good. There's a weird thing with audiobooks where the reader will sometimes adopt different voices for different characters, and this guy does do that in the Da Vinci Code, and it's not horrible, except when he does the woman's voice, which is sort of, a little weird.
Is it like, and Melanie said, "Can you please pass the salt?"
Yeah, it's
okay.
Yeah.
Very cool.
It's a good one. It's a good one.
Yeah, let me see if I could download this now. I probably used up all my credits. Audible.com/Andrew. If you want to get an audiobook that we choose here on the show, or anything you want to get, Paul always has really, really good picks. You get a free audiobook if you go to audible.com/Andrew. And I want to thank Audible for supporting What the Tuck. So, Paul, it is time for our What Went Wrong segment.
Yep.
This week, what did we do last week? Did we not do it last week? Or we did do it last week?
I think we might have skipped it.
Yeah, because I had
you were traveling. I think we traveling,
yeah. I probably forgot all about it.
What went wrong with Andrew's trip.
Oh, what happened?
The technology he did bring.
No, we did do it. We did what happened. Yeah, that's what we called it. That's what confused me. It's what went wrong.
Okay.
Last week we did AMD. And we both tried to block that segment out of our minds. And this week we're going to do Sony. We're going to discuss what happened to Sony because they really, from let's say, where do you want to start with what went wrong with them? Because I would say like from the 80s into the 90s, they didn't, well, they still transitioned. I guess it was like the mid 90s that they started losing.
So I'm not enough of an expert on Sony to pinpoint the points where it all went wrong for Sony, but I can tell you a couple of things about them that I think are important. One is that, like Microsoft, Sony is a very big business with lots of businesses in it, and everyone has probably seen that famous picture of the Microsoft org chart where all the businesses have guns pointed at each other and how we laugh, and that was certainly true of Microsoft for a while. Microsoft is actually changing the way that they do business right now and the way that their internal businesses interoperate. And so I actually think they're overcoming that problem. But Sony never really did. And what kept Sony going for decades was that for whatever reason, at any given time, some part of that company was doing great. And so their TV business would keep them going for a while until we suddenly realized that Sony TVs aren't all that great, or that they're not good enough compared to these low-cost Korean competitors like Vizio or whatever, that they can, command the prices that they used to compare. So I think the big part of Sony that will always bother me is the music business, because this is a company that made the Walkman,
The Walkman.
and had an incredible Walkman hardware, not just the cassettes that I remember from when I was a kid. I had various Walkman, and I actually remember in 1984, I went on a trip, and a friend from high school let me borrow their really beautifully made, like metal Sony Walkman. It was barely bigger than the cassette, and it was like super high tech, for the day. And I was just blown away by the quality of this thing. And then, of course, later the CD Walkman and all that kind of stuff. So here's a company that owns the Walkman brand, has decades of experience making Walkman, and we're moving into this digital age. It is also a company that, by the way, owns a record company.
Yeah.
And these two groups aren't working together.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
And I remember many of their horrible, horrible products and services with regards to music. These Walkman MP3 players, which actually you shouldn't even call them. They played like A-Track or whatever their stupid format was.
Mini disc?
And so,
mini disc?
Well, no. I mean, I'm talking about the format. There was a digital format you had to get music onto these devices, one of which, by the way, looked like a big pen. You had to convert it first into their format in the player and the PC, and then get it onto the device. And it was just so painful to use. And they were doing this right at the moment when the MP3 player market was booming. Creative came in with whatever they had, Rio, and then, of course, obviously Apple, kind of blew everything away right there. Talk about missed opportunities.
Yeah.
I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. But
you know what else changed for Sony? The brand recognition and brand loyalty was something that hurt them. I think regardless of them making their mistakes, they still could have dominated in a certain field, which is television, that's what they're really known for to many people. And right. When you walk into a store, what is the Bentley of TVs? You know what? It was a Sony for a long time. You wanted to buy a Sony.
They still make high-end Sony TVs
still do,
that have a decent name. What are the high-end Sonys?
The Bravias?
Yeah, Sony Bravia.
But I cannot tell you one person that has a Sony TV anymore.
I know.
And is it cost?
I do know one guy who has one, but I consistently have people. This just happened the other night. People come over, put some shows on, and like, damn, that TV looks really nice. What is that? And it's like, that TV is nothing.
Yeah,
it is like a $700 Vizio.
Yeah,
and that's the problem.
The MP. Let me ask you, Paul. Samsung, for example. Okay. What was Samsung like to you? I mean, I'm trying to remember, and I don't remember having like this whole like, wow, Samsungs are good products. I remember thinking like, oh, it's the Samsung.
Well, I can tell you how they hit my radar. I go to industry shows, and every time there was an Xbox demo, every single time it was a Samsung display. Every single time. And that caught my eye. And I remember looking at a display that was running some Xbox game, whatever it was, in a Microsoft booth at some trade show. I don't remember where it was or what year it was. And thinking, I am going to buy one of these for my Xbox. This looks incredible. Like, it just looks incredible. And I actually, right now, by the way, the Xbox in my office is on a Samsung display. And that's why. That's the connection that I made. I knew nothing about them. Samsung, for me, has been, the first gen Windows phones. I really like the Samsung. Actually, my Ultrabook is a Samsung, for whatever that's worth.
And Sony never did that well in laptops because they were expensive.
No, and Sony was always kind of a boutique thing. There was a Sony style store that was in the Copley Plaza in Boston for years and years and years. And we used to go in there, and you'd always stop in there. You'd never buy anything. I mean, but their laptops were always kind of fascinating looking. Their TVs, of course. And I remember the last time I was in there, which was probably a year and a half ago, because they're gone now.
We have one here. No, we have one here.
Well, I mean, they're gone from Boston.
Okay. Gigantic, too.
Yeah, the big thing that they were pushing at the time was like 3D TVs, and I think they had one that didn't require you to wear glasses. I think one of the deals was you could stand in front of it and just kind of see it. But, it's funny, like, first to last, every time I went in there, never spent a cent in that store. You kind of go in, you look, you're like, oh yeah, that's nice, and then you leave, and that's I think that's also part of the problem for Sony.
I mean, to me, their biggest not a flop, but the biggest thing that they kind of fell behind is with the PlayStation.
Well, sure.
To me, I just hooked up my PlayStation 3 because I wanted to play a game on there that I got, and I did the updates, I did all that, and yeah, there's some visual changes from the time that I bought it, but it still looks
Not many. I mean, that thing.
not a lot at all, but it's.
I've always found their software design to be terrible.
Oh, it is terrible.
And the other thing is, and you could pick up any Sony remote in the world. The Blu-ray remote for the PS3 is a great example. The remote for the Sony TV I have in my office, that is a Google TV, is a great example. It is just a giant grid of buttons. It is the most awful UI on earth, and their remotes always look like that.
Oh, it's insane. But I mean, that's the same problem. That is the same issue that Nintendo faces.
Yeah,
software design. These two companies are having
They get stuck. Moving on to the next big thing is really hard. Sony displaced Nintendo as the biggest maker of video game machines with the original PlayStation. No, sorry, with the PlayStation 2. Actually, maybe for both of them, right? PlayStation 1 and 2?
Say that again?
Was the original PlayStation, was that the biggest video game machine of that generation, or was it the PlayStation 2 that finally did it?
No, the PlayStation was.
Okay, so 1 and 2.
1 and 2.
I remember Microsoft being very afraid of Sony because of the PS2, because that thing was like a computer. And that every one of these devices, there was always this rumor that you were going to be able to attach a keyboard and make this into a computer. Remember, the PS3 had a Linux version running on it briefly. That was going to be a big deal and never really amounted to anything. And then Nintendo came roaring back with some stupid little, motion control weirdness, and somehow managed to win this past generation.
I mean, that was the only thing. It was the gimmick of Nintendo that kind of saved them. Sony doesn't have that luxury right now where they have and they were inexpensive too. Sony put out I guess their gimmick was the Blu-ray. What would have happened if Sony didn't have a Blu-ray on there?
Right. So right at the death of physical media, they're pushing like the last great format. Sony's in a tough spot for video games because I think Nintendo does have some kind of a built-in market, although we've seen that's been diminished. Microsoft, like Sony, has what we call like exclusive IP, like games that are only going to be available on that system. So they both have that. But I think Microsoft has a better IP, but also more of a third-party services pitcher, app platform, et cetera. All
online.
All that stuff. I think they just have a better solution for consumers than Sony does.
I'll give you a great example of why I'm so disappointed in the PlayStation and in Sony's interface. Obviously my credit card is different from the time that I bought stuff on there in the PlayStation store.
Yep.
And I needed to change my credit card.
I've done this, yeah.
It is the worst experience ever to change a credit card.
Here's what I did.
What did you do?
I started a new account.
You gave up.
You're right. It is absolutely impossible. Yeah.
It is absolutely impossible. And it's very confusing because what happens is unlike Microsoft where they were doing like the coins, you buy like Microsoft points, which is another ridiculous idea behind it. I don't understand why. You have to buy points because there's always something left over. It's bizarre. With Sony, they give you like, okay, do you want to buy $9, $20, $50, $100, whatever? And you buy it, and it says like, okay, we're going to use this credit card. I'm like, no, how do I say I don't want to use this credit card? You can't. You have to manually put the credit card in. And then it goes through the PlayStation Store, and then you got to like find it in the center. It's very confusing. I mean, it was just bizarre to me. And the fact that when you leave a program, you get that black screen saying like, okay, now we're shutting down the program. That is the epitome of what Sony is to me right now. And I'm hoping with the next generation they're able to change that. But these are not companies that understand software. These are hardware companies, and Microsoft is a software company.
Right.
And that's why the user experience overall on the Xbox is far better than what you're going to get with Sony. I mean, this is a big problem for them. So what went wrong, Paul? Give me one device that you think this was it for Sony. What went wrong?
Like oh geez, I don't know if I can. I mean, I think that rather than it being a device, I would say that it was their inability to get their warring internal businesses working together. I think that is what did it.
I would say the MP3. when they lost control of the MP3, that's really.
Yeah.
If you think about it, think about it. Who beat them? Someone that is not even competing with them beat them. Apple.
Well, sometimes it helps to to bring in an outsider just because they they don't have the built-in prejudices, that someone like Sony might have had. I mean, there was a cachet to the iPod, that they've continued very nicely, to the iPad and the iPhone, obviously, that was just breathtaking. It wasn't just better, it was way better.
Way better, yeah.
Yeah.
Poor Sony.
Well,
Poor Sony.
I look, they did it to themselves. I mean, again, you have all these businesses that in many cases are doing good stuff, and they're not working together. I mean, that's just bad culture, and the leadership of that company should have fixed that. Howard Stringer came in, and I don't think he did anything. Is there any positive outcome from his reign of terror at Sony?
Not really.
I don't think so.
I mean, even brand, trusting in the brand. I mean, that doesn't exist. Yeah. I was by the way, I'm a big Hitachi fan. I was a huge Hitachi TV fan.
Yeah.
I thought they put out great TVs. I still have my Hitachi Plasma from 2003. Great TV.
Right.
Never bought a Sony. So that's it, Paul. That was our segment. I'm all finished.
I used to buy Sony stuff, by the way. I used to buy Sony stereo equipment, receivers, and CD players and CD changers, cassette players. I had like a double cassette, component, stereo, and speakers, but that was a long time ago. And again,
what is the last Sony product you bought?
Well, it was PS3. I've owned two PS3s. No, that's not true. Actually, this past, in fact, just 5 months ago, my son got the new PSP, whatever that's called. What is the new PSP
the Vita
called?
The Vita.
The Vita. Yeah, PS Vita. Yeah, and by the way, talk about a flashback experience. This poor kid spent 45 minutes installing updates and going through crappy Sony UIs, trying to log into that PlayStation account, which is why I switched it, by the way. That's when it happened. It was Christmas morning. Poor kid sitting there on the couch trying to get his thing going. And he's just getting Sony'd the whole time. And not to mention the fact that the device itself is this kind of throwback, old-fashioned for today in this age when everything's touchscreen and whatever. And he's got this, it's got the 2D pads, and which I kind of like. I mean, theoretically, I've never actually used it. I've never brought it on a trip or actually used the damn thing. But yeah, it's just typical. It's still the same.
Maybe they'll catch up. Nintendo trying. They're trying. They put out a big update, and it's as slow as it ever was, so it made no difference.
Well, their PS4 announcement was a big deal. So people are still paying attention. They still have some cachet with that audience in particular, as they should. And, we'll see. I'm very interested in getting one. I mean, I'll probably get a PS4 just to compare it.
Oh, me too.
And we'll see.
I mean, I buy these things and I never use them. My Nintendo Wii hasn't been turned on in about who knows how long. I turned it on, did the update, and I turned it back off. I mean, that's the experience that I have with it right now. So, we'll see. All right, Paul. Time to wrap it up.
All right, sir.
WinSuperside.com for all things Paul Thurrott. You can find out all things Paul Thurrott. You could also get traveling tips from Paul. If you miss any portion of the show, of course, you could go to gfknetwork.com. I don't know what's happening. I'm losing it. You go to gfknetwork.com and catch the archive show there. Also, guys, subscribe to the show. I encourage you guys, please subscribe. It makes our lives a lot easier. And Paul will stop hitting me if you guys subscribe. We'll see you all next week on What the Tuck. Good night, everybody.